So you asked me about social justice taking us off track, right?
Or the potential for it to do that.
Yeah, because so I got sort of two ideas about this. One is that we focus on the issues. So what we end up doing is becoming issue focused.
Okay, that's really important to know. Yeah.
Rather than people focused. So a good example of this is now what's going to Dr. Humphreys, she wrote a letter about institutionalized racism at King's and some commitment to address these issues and to work on these issues. So that's a good example of it, but lots of companies are making statements, and in fact CEOs who don't make statements end up getting, like, just in the sort of market, not outside the Christian sphere, but there's this pressure for CEOs to be making some sort of like flat out comment about this. This doesn't even regard the more focal points of, say, the police or RCMP or something like that. So we become what happens is we become issue focused, and then what that leads us to do is to make sort of vast promises. And when we do that, we're starting to step away from who we are as people, and instead we're trying to again come on the right side of history, like in this sense that we have to make this statement now, and we have to start working towards it, and we'll have to demonstrate it. So we end up putting ourselves in a kind of promissory thing, like it's almost like we're taking out a mortgage on our future. So so we take out a mortgage and we make a promise to pay it back, and that's essentially what making statements about fighting institutionalized racism becomes. It becomes a mortgage, and we tie ourselves. In a sense, we tie ourselves down, and to an issue rather than to people. So the alternate side of this first aspect of my answer, the alternate side of that is that I think that if we make commitments to people, regardless of their ethnic origins, not in a kind of not commitments in the sense, not in the kind of like affirmative action type of commitment, but rather as, oh, I promise to stand with you while we fight this. So what's happened is we've allowed ourselves, by making these kind of comments, it's still coming from a sort of white culture, and in Canada we would rather call it a settler culture, because there's lots of language about settler culture and their relationship with Aboriginals. So I'll speak of it in the Canadian context. The Americans have another set of problems yet, but as Canadian Christian Reformed people, if we commit ourselves to issues, rather than I want to stand with you in awareness of what your reality is and belong in that reality with you, then if we do that, then I think we're much more doing what Jesus would do. Like, we have to stand with people, and you might call it institutionalized racism, which I think might be something like just recognizing that we have unconscious biases towards, like, white people. Like, you and I get together freely and easily. It's really easy for us to do because both of us come from a similar background, right? And both of us, we just don't feel like there's any obstacle at all. But if it was a black person who had done the same thing, and it's happened before, they've said, hey, can we talk? And I've talked with lots of Indian students this way. Hey, can we talk? I would feel like it was more monumental, like there's something more special going on. We're reaching across the racial boundary, that kind of thing. Like, that's probably what I would feel, which is kind of hypocritical. So in my regard, I'd say, yes, I have that. But rather, if I was following what Jesus wanted me to do, I would be like, oh, when those people come, I'm just going to stand with them. So
Yeah.
I would
So,
stand with them like I feel like I stand with you.
yeah. Okay.
Or
So is that one of the two
that's one of
points
the
you
two.
wanted?
That's one of the two. So there's this all
Okay.
alternate. So it's from a social, mass social sort of construction to a personal construction. This is me and you. So
Yeah.
that's one way to take it out. And my second response to it is, I still think that internally we need to. It's not just about presentation, but it's about justifying ourselves to God.
Oh.
So
Oh yeah.
yes. So there's
Well,
this sense that
that's a dead end.
if I don't make this statement, or if I don't make some sort of vast sort of presentation about my attitudes towards it, then I'm going to have to account to God about this later on at Judgment Day, or I will feel a little bit guilty, like I haven't done enough. And there's this have I done enough sort of thing that's going on, I think, within the social justice mindset.
Okay.
Right.
Hey,
I think that's there. There's a profound amount of guilt that's going on there.
yeah, 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 yeah. Can you say something about how you think social justice can be a religion or like a religion?
Oh yeah, sure. Uh, there's a certain sort of worship. Actually, what it is idolatry. I believe it's idolatry.
Okay, okay.
Uh, I mean, uh, and I don't want to diminish the good feeling of people who are practicing social justice
No,
as a
no.
like I'm not trying to diminish it, but I want people to recognize. So I'm going to speak to you as if you're a social justice person.
Oh, good. I can hardly wait.
So what I mean is, I think it's a kind of idolatry in the sense of like small I idolatry, in the sense that what's happening with social justice is this feeling that by our efforts we can reconcile the world. We can reconcile the world to God.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right. So I mean, that's the deep down answer, right? I could give you a whole essay about that, just a spoken essay about that. I'm not going to do that, but so I could show demonstrations of that example, but I'll just sort of uh, I'll give one example. The idea that, so I want to contrast the social justice idea with the idea of charity, with the traditional Christian concept of charity. Uh, Charity, in a lot of senses, the best kind of charity, one that's done in secret, and one that's done on biblical grounds, does this. It's I stand with you financially, or giving my time, right? Those are aspects of charity, right?
Oh,
But
okay.
I stand with you. It's the I stand with you. That's the Christian motive of charity. But social justice is often much more demonstrable. It becomes institutionalized. So we have institutions, both in the Christian Reformed Church and in general society. We have institutions meant to fight social injustice, and so we develop them as institutions, and then it ends up becoming something like committee work, and
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and committee work. I mean, maybe this is the old Democrats in us, but it takes forever. But it's a kind of idolatry, because it still goes to this idea that we can save the world with our
Yeah,
behavior, and that's
yeah,
actually that's not a biblical message.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I really appreciate hearing that. That helps a lot. That I think that's what we were talking, among other things, but I think that's what we were talking about before, that I was trying to recapture, Raymond. So thanks for that.
And it's also why I mentioned before we started recording, why I mentioned why it's the rich man on the road, right? Because the rich man on the road was a guy who was a perfect Jew. He honored his parents. He kept the commandments. He was a good steward of his money. He followed all the rules. and he followed these rules, and then Jesus said, no, you have to give up your money and follow me. And then that's a totally different command. That's to stand with me.
Yeah.
And that's why he bows his head, because I think because he's just destroyed. His whole way of life has been kind of like, oh crap, what am I going to do? Like, I can't do this. Yeah. And so I think Christian Reformed people, if Jesus confronted them, would say this, right?
That the one thing you're hanging on to, you need to give up. Yeah. Whatever
Right?
that is.
And that's an element of pride, which is a version of idolatry, right?
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's really helpful. Yeah. So what hats are you wearing these days, Raymond?
Okay, so I'm down to 3